The next person I would like to welcome on stage is the co-founder and president of Coursera, Daphne Koller. Hello, Daphne. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here on a rainy Paris morning. Today, I'd like to tell you about the work that we've been doing at Coursera for the last almost 3 years in transforming the shape of education. So, my first slide. Thank you. So this work that we've done started out almost exactly 3 years ago with a Stanford experiment in which we took 3 courses in computer science and put them out for everyone around the world to take for free. We had no idea what would happen from that. Maybe a few hundred people would enroll in each. But surprisingly to us, within a matter of weeks, each of those courses had an enrollment of 100,000 students or more. So 100,000 students is a very large number, but what was striking wasn't only that, it was that these people came from every country, every age group, and every walk of life. So we were in a position to take the kind of quality education that had been available only to a tiny handful of Stanford students and make it available to anyone around the world with an internet connection. That was clearly an opportunity that was too large to pass up in terms of the transformative impact that it could have, and led us in January of 2012 to spin this out of Stanford as a separate endeavor called Coursera, and launch in April 2012 with 4 university partners, 37 courses, and 200,000 students. Fast forward just about 2.5 years from the day that we launched, and this is approximately where we are today. We have 115, actually as of yesterday, 116 university partners from 23 different countries, offering close to 900 courses by now to about 10.5 million learners worldwide. And I'll talk a little bit about those statistics in just a moment. So here's some of the university partners that are working with us. You can see they're top universities from the United States and Canada, but also from Australia, Switzerland, France, UK, Germany, Mexico, Singapore, China, and so on and so forth. Just here in France, up until yesterday, we had 5 of the top French universities as partners. You can see them listed here. And as of yesterday, I'm proud to say we've added a 6th, Sciences Po. And we're very proud of being able to offer an education, not only courses in English, but also in French and in 8 other languages to learners worldwide. Let me, before I get into the details, let me close with a few cute statistics just to give you a notion of the scale. We've had over 1,700 distinct sessions offered in the last 2.5 years. There's been 13,000 years, not hours, years of video that have been watched by our learners. 56 million quizzes have been submitted, and overall we've had 1.75 million course completions by our learners. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what these courses are like, who our learners are, and why this is going to be transformative. So first, the what. These courses are not the standard lecture capture from the back of the classroom. They are courses that are designed for online consumption and as such are not shackled by the constraints of what you can do within a physical space. They can be short, modular, to the point, explaining the concept clearly, briefly, with well-defined learning outcomes. And you can see that you can do stuff that you can't do in a physical classroom, like do a sustainability class literally in the field, or a sociology class that is actually a discussion via Google Hangouts of 10 people from 10 different countries presenting their very diverse perspectives on a sociological problem. And these are just 2 of the many innovative formats that our instructors have come up with. But it's not just about the video. Each of the courses has rigorous, meaningful assessments. And so how do you do assessments at scale? You can do 2 things. You can do computer-based grading, or you can do peer grading, and we've done both. So computer-based grading, people typically think of as multiple choice. You have a multiple choice question, and indeed we have that, but it turns out that our instructors have been very creative in leveraging auto-grading to do the kinds of courses that you wouldn't think can be done at the scale of 100,000 students per class. So here's one such example. This is the course by Professor Mike Schatz from Georgia Tech. It's called Introductory Physics 1 with Laboratory. how do you do a lab class when the vast majority of your students have never seen the inside of a lab? So what Mike did is he had them do the experiments using objects that are found in their own surroundings, like balls and tables and things like that, like this girl that you see shooting a hoop in a basketball court. They record their experiment using their cell phone camera, and then Mike developed some pretty cool image processing software that tracks the trajectories of the objects as they move, computes the velocities and accelerations and so on, and uses that to grade the students' work and evaluate whether they did the experiment and the measurements correctly. So this is auto-grading, but applied in a very creative way. Now, that's great, and it takes us a whole lot further than we thought we could go, but it still obviously doesn't address a lot of the kinds of work that you need in courses in the humanities and the social sciences and medicine, where you really need more open-ended, creative type of work. In order to address that, we devised a framework called peer assessment, or peer grading, where the students submit their work and then are given a rubric or a set of criteria by the instructor that allows them to provide critical feedback to the work of other students. And this turns out to be a really useful technique, not only for scaling out assessment on work like essays, musical compositions, designs, and so on, but also because it turns out that it's a really useful pedagogical tool. People learn as much or more from critically thinking about the work of others as they do from doing the work themselves. It forces them to think critically about what is a good and not so good assignment, and it teaches them tremendously how to do better themselves next time. And it opens the door to the kinds of courses that you really wouldn't think can be done at MOOC scale. I can give you dozens, hundreds of examples. This is just one of my favorites. It's a design class from the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania, and it's an 8-week project class where the students first come up with a problem that they're trying to solve, then a concept, a prototype, and finally an artifact. Each week they submit that stage in their design and they get feedback from 5 peers. So by the end they've gotten 40 pieces of feedback, and Professor Carl Ulrich tells us that the designs that he's gotten from this class are actually, in many cases, the same quality that he gets from his Wharton students at the University of Pennsylvania. And then finally, you want to reward people for the hard work that they do. And so one of the things that we've done is at the end of the course, if you've completed the course and done all the assessments and passed a certain threshold determined by the instructor, you can get a verified certificate. Now, the verified certificate serves 2 purposes. It's a tremendous learner value because you can present it to the employer and say, hey, look, I really did complete this course and I'm qualified to do this work. And for us, it's a revenue stream because there's a modest fee associated with a credential. It's about $50, allowing us to continue to offer the education for free to anyone, anywhere, while still bringing in, hopefully, a revenue stream that will make us sustainable. When you put all these things together in a package, about a year ago, we've launched these things that we call specializations. These are actually larger units of learning than individual courses, sequences that come together to form a whole that's bigger than the sum of the parts. And at the end of this, of each of those, there is an actual project, which is assessed using the peer grading technology, where students are showed that not only have they learned the basic skills, they're able to put them together, synthesize them, and actually do the work of solving a real-world problem using those skills. And this kind of focused skill building has turned out to be an incredibly popular offering among our learners. So that's the what. Now let me talk briefly about the who. Who are the learners who have been coming to the platform? Who are those 10.5 million people? So first, a little bit of taxonomy. About 1/3 of our learners come each from the US, from other developed economies such as France, and from emerging economies. And these emerging economies are not just the big BRIC countries. We have learners from every single country around the world. And when I say every single country, I mean including North Korea and Antarctica. Which is surprising. And when you look at some of the statistics here, you see we have 4% of our learners from Africa, 11% from Latin America, so a pretty broad distribution. In order to reach those learners, we've had to do a number of things. First of all, we've had to close the language gap, so we've put in place a very significant translation effort. Excitingly, it's a volunteer translation effort. We reached out to our learners and said, Those of you who are bilingual, come and help make the content more accessible to people in your language group. We launched this in April. We now have 40,000 volunteer translators of whom several thousand are active at any point in time, and they've translated 140 courses into different languages. So we're really excited about being able to expand access to education by breaking the language barrier. Another thing that we've had to do to increase access is put a very significant effort on mobile. As many of us know, in many parts of the world, the primary access to the internet is via a mobile device. And so at this point, we have an iOS as well as an iPhone app, and over 30% of our learners access the site via mobile. And then finally, in order to increase access even more, for those people who really have a challenge closing that last mile, we've set up a network of what we call Coursera Learning Hubs. This was an effort that we piloted initially with the US State Department, who opened the doors of, at that point, about 30 US embassies abroad, invited learners who were taking Coursera MOOCs to come and learn together, have access to the internet, have a safe, protected site to learn, and a facilitator who was in general a US embassy employee, all pro bono, helping them make their way through the material. So this started out at US embassies. It was very successful. The completion rates at these learning hubs are generally over 70%. And it's now running, I think, in about 70 US embassies and has expanded considerably beyond that to New York public libraries. The SLIM Foundation in Mexico has a network of several thousand digital libraries in Mexico and Spanish-speaking LATAM. And there's a whole range of others, including a truly inspiring effort at the Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya that was spearheaded by a passionate professor at the University of Geneva who actually brought a tractor trailer with solar panels on the roof to give refugees in that camp access to these courses. So that's one way of segmenting our learners is geographically. The other is by looking at who they are from a demographic perspective. And so this is a rough segmentation that gives you a sense of who our learners are. There is one smallish group of learners on our site, maybe about 15%, of current or pre-college learners. Primarily, these are people between 15 and 25, and they're using the courses to supplement their existing education. Very few, if any, are using this to substitute for traditional college education. Rather, they're looking for it as a way of making them better students in their current educational setting. There is a broad population of people who are purely enrichment learners. They take courses in art history or astronomy, and they just want to learn something new to expand their minds. Very broad age distribution. And then we have a very large cohort, about 50% or more of our learners who are working professionals. And they're interested in using this to reskill or upskill themselves in their current job category. Roughly speaking, they fall into two categories: tech skill builders and business career changers, and they're really people who are looking to this as a way of transforming their lives, and I'll give a couple of examples at the end. So that brings me to the last piece of this, which is the why. Why is this going to transform education? Why is this transforming the world? So I'm going to give two answers to this. One is the personal answer, which is talking about the lives that have been transformed by giving them access to education. And I could stand here for probably an hour and a half or more giving learner stories as examples of people whose lives have been changed, but I'm only going to give you three as exemplars. This is Scotty. Scotty is a 47-year-old undergraduate student in the United States. Scotty was a star student in high school, received a full scholarship to study at UT Austin, was unable to take it because he had to work for a living to support his family. Ended up working in a menial job and until he was laid off in 2005. When he was laid off, he lost first his home, then his wife, then custody of his 13-year-old daughter, and was living in a car. He promised himself that if he would ever manage to emerge from this cycle, he would not let this happen again. So when he finally did, he started to look up college classes, but he was scared to go back to college because he'd never been to college, and it's been 30 years since he went to high school. So he figured, I'm going to start with an online experience first, just to regain confidence. So he started taking a couple of our courses, so he says, I had a total of 6 college credits to my name and had not seen the inside of a classroom in almost 30 years. Took our courses, regained his confidence, applied to an actual undergraduate degree program, and told us later that in April of 2013, he was named Outstanding Sophomore of the Year and then was inducted into the International Honor Society for Psychology. Example number 1. Example number 2, different part of the world. Sharmeen Shahabuddin from Bangladesh. Sharmeen is a social activist who wanted to do something about the fact that in her country, girls are traditionally sold into servitude to a husband or an employer. She convinced a friend to run away with her, and they started a bakery, but unfortunately, neither of them knew how to run a business, and the bakery was floundering, making $900 a month, which is not enough for them to live on. So she discovered online courses, and she started taking first an economics course from Penn, and then a course from Michigan, and then she continued to take more and more courses from Michigan and Irvine and Penn, and finally a Wharton class. And she learned how to run a business. So now, Sharmeen's bakery is earning not $900, but $5,000 a month, which is enough to support not only her and her friend, but 5 other women. And so she's basically been able to save 7 women from a life of servitude and provide them a meaningful life. Example number 3, Kehinda Adewusi from Lagos, Nigeria. Kehinda was a low-level employee at IBM in Lagos, started taking courses in tech and entrepreneurship online, realized that he had it in him to become an entrepreneur, and left IBM, built a startup that now employs 10 full-time employees and 2 interns. One of Kehinda's problems is that he has trouble finding qualified employees in Lagos because the quality of education is not so great. And so he forces his employees to be enrolled all the time in Coursera classes so that they can continue their education and become better employees in their job category. These are 3 examples. As I said, there's thousands of others. So I'm going to move away from this reason for why this is going to be transformative and changing the world by giving access to opportunity, and talk about another reason why this could be transformative, sort of a longer-term vision, if you will, which is using data in teaching. So I'm going to start by just quoting a couple of our instructors who have been overwhelmed by the availability of data in their teaching. So this is Ignacio Martinez from University of Virginia, who explains to us that in his experience, learning is a black box in the classroom. But MOOCs allow us to see what students are doing. And with hundreds of thousands of students, if there's a correlation to be found, we'll find it. So he's talking about the behavioral data as you track students through the system. You have this amazing visibility into where they're spending their time and what they're getting right and what they're getting wrong. Pavel Pevsner from UC San Diego says, where else can we get a gold mine of comments contributing to further improvements of our courses? He's talking about the kinds of comments that you get on the discussion forums. So both of these are talking about how you can suddenly have a gold mine of data in order to improve one's courses. So here's an example of a place where this might be used. This is one of the data dashboards that we're offering instructors. And one of the things that you can do is drill down into the details and say, here are what I thought were 4 equivalent variants of the same problem that the system was randomizing between and offering one or the other to the users on a random basis. And surprisingly, you can see that 2 of the variants get an accuracy by the students of 95%. And the other 2 are approximately random. You get that within a week of putting the course up. And so you now look at it and you say, obviously, I didn't explain this part of the content well, or maybe the question is badly formed, and you can fix it. And the next week, you have 1,000 new data points to tell you whether you correctly fixed this or not, which means that you now have the opportunity to do what Google and Facebook and all the other websites do on a regular basis, which is constant, iterative improvement that make things better and better and better and better from week to week, as opposed to on-campus teaching where you teach a course once, and then next time it's taught to 50 people, which is hardly enough data to do anything with, and you don't have a chance to improve it until you teach it again next year. So the cycle of improvement is so slow, and the amount of data that you have to make this so limited that you really can't improve teaching very significantly. So I think one really big implication of this looking forward is that teaching is going to be turning into a data science. This is the same type of transformation that happened for astronomy with high-throughput telescopy, or with genomics with high-throughput sequencing, or is now happening to medicine with electronic health records, where the science turns from something that you studied 10 people and hope the conclusions extrapolated. Now you can study hundreds of thousands, and really get a deep, meaningful understanding of what makes learning work and not work. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity here to really transform the way in which we teach people by getting a much deeper understanding of pedagogy and what effective teaching looks like. And I think as a long-term vision, this is probably one of the more compelling things. Thank you very much.